All right, I have one more thing to add at the end of this aspect or this particular module when we're talking about anger and happiness. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was that when we talk about anger, and when I have in the past talked to people about anger, usually one of the key terms that comes up as an important point of resolving anger is the term of forgiveness. And in a lot of ways, people have a very skewed view of what forgiveness is. Oftentimes we think that forgiveness is the same as I'm sorry, and the other person responds with that's okay. And I would suggest to you that that's a very shallow way of considering forgiveness. As a matter of fact, it's actually quite superficial. And it really serves to perpetuate sterility and disconnectedness in our relationships, because we really don't deal with the issue that has harmed us or wounded us in our relationship. And so it doesn't work that way. And my suggestion to you is that it also doesn't mean that it's an apology. Now, it's interesting to me that we have co-opted this particular term, because one of the terms of apology is to give a defense. You talk about somebody being an apologist. They're giving a defense for a particular point of view. They're an apologist for it. Obviously, apology has another term, and it usually relates back up to this: well, I said I'm sorry. But I would suggest to you that forgiveness, in the true biblical sense of the word, the one thing we do know is that it is a financial term. Forgiving had to do with the cancellation of a debt. And usually when someone has harmed us, either they've gotten angry or we've gotten angry or whatever, usually we begin to write a note of what they owe us. Usually one of the key items of that particular note or loan, if you will, is that they owe us an apology. In other words, to own up to how they've hurt us. Forgiveness, by its nature, I would suggest to you, given the way that it's defined in the Bible, is that it is freely given, and it does not remove the harm that's been done. Forgiveness actually, in many ways, frees the one who's giving the forgiveness or granting the forgiveness. It does not free the person who has harmed us, but it does free us. And so I would suggest to you that instead of thinking of forgiveness as a conditional, contractual sort of thing, if I forgive you, then you need to change, I would suggest that we have two different things we have to consider when we're talking about forgiveness. First, we have to decide to forgive. In other words, it is a choice. But there's something that comes after this, and that falls in the category of what I would call the process of forgiveness. And one of the guys that I used to work with, his name is David Stoop. He wrote a book called Forgiving Our Parents, Forgiving Ourselves. And he suggests that this process includes five different steps. The first one is to identify how I've been hurt. You know, a lot of times we go to forgive somebody and we really haven't identified how we've been harmed. We say, I forgive you, but if they were to say, what are you forgiving me for, we wouldn't really be able to identify what that would be. The second thing is to identify the feelings that we have about it. And these are equally as important because they're part of our being. That's how we're designed, is to have feelings. The next step beyond that is to express these feelings with somebody who's safe, preferably not the person who's hurt me, and express these feelings with someone safe. Most of us need someone who is kind of a lightning rod for us, that we can communicate these really hard emotions and feelings to them, and they don't do anything with it. They simply listen to it, help us put some perspective on it, and then we can begin the process of letting it go. The next step he suggests is to protect ourselves with good boundaries. And that's a whole nother really topic that would have to be discussed in a little bit more length, and I'll have to forestall that to another time. And then from there, now let me move over here and start here. The next step would then be to cancel the debt. And this is really the true step of forgiveness. Now, what I want you to see is that we've traversed all of this territory from identifying how we've been hurt, identifying the feelings, expressing those feelings. All of these things are every bit as important as the debt is. But we have to bring ourselves and participate in bringing ourselves to a point where we can actually cancel the debt. And in that regard, we release our demand on that other person, which is really hard to do because we want to hang on to the demand in order to get it fulfilled, and then and only then can we be free. And then the last one is consider reconciliation. One thing I want you to recognize is that reconciliation is an act and something entirely separate from forgiveness. A lot of times we put together forgiveness and reconciliation when in fact they actually need to be separated. I need to figure out how I can forgive that other person who's hurt me and then release them, which makes reconciliation possible, but it does not guarantee that reconciliation will occur. And each one of these, I would suggest to you that handling our anger and handling our happiness are both very much tied up in what we do with forgiveness. And that's just for my 2 cents on the topic. It's not in your book, but it's something to consider when we're talking about happiness and anger.